Joyful Danish. Stay human. Is it even still possible to stay human? Maybe. It's not too late. Welcome to the show. I'm Joyful Danish, Daniel, cryptotherapist here, trying to improve health in Web3 and in tech in general, but often is Web3 that's not really getting that much attention. And that's also why I sometimes then bring different guests from the tech industry to actually talk about, okay, what can we talk about when it comes to health? Because it does seem like to be a little bit of a taboo when you are out there in the industry. So today I actually have LIoyd Moore. Is that the correct way to say it?
Yeah, perfect.
Right. And I looked a little bit up on you, and it was kind of wild to see like a lot of the stuff that you did. Are there something particular that you maybe find striking that when it comes to like your whole career so far, what has been the most interesting part? Has there been certain roles that you found in particular interesting than others?
Yeah, as you say, I've done quite a few different things, and probably there's an unusual mix that you wouldn't normally find over the span of 20, 30 years. In terms of things being interesting, I've always found computer programming to be of the most interest to me. But another thing that's really surprised me is my love of doing things physical. I spent 12 years as a Royal Marines commando, and some of that time overlaps with professional rugby at a professional level, and I've always found the most interesting thing to be to really kind of push myself both mentally and physically. And with that said, I've had a lot of opportunities to do that in roles that's, as I say, from the military to then hardware engineering, and then ultimately software engineering over the past sort of 2 decades.
Yeah, because it does seem like a very two different worlds, isn't it? How did you transition to tech?
So, from a young age, I've always been a massive fan of puzzles, and since the age of 13, when I got my first computer, a Sinclair ZX81, that's where the love of tech was born, and it's just stayed with me. This being this constant thread of wanting to understand things at the deepest level. And when I left the military and then spent a couple of years as a hardware engineer, I was involved in some low-level programming, things like embedded chip programming and things like that. And the moment I kind of returned to the software fold, so to speak, something reignited inside my brain. And when I was asked by a friend back in 2003 to write a website, I was blown away by how much fun it was compared to building, sign tables inside a chip and things like that. And from there, I've just not stopped. I've gone through one role to another and never looked back.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, because it seems like that you actually started like when you were 13 with like tech, computers and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's like an interest that you keep getting back to, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. There's something magical about being able to create something seemingly out of nothing, and there's some philosophical elements there as well, and we can go into that later on.
Sure. Yeah, because if we have to like try to go straight into some of the health aspect, for example, like do you have something you're actively working on in terms of like health or routines, overall wellness that you would like to share? Something that you maybe are working or testing?
Yeah, so the physicality side of life is something that's always been important to me. So at home, I've got a very well equipped gym, so that I have no excuses that I can train every day. I've even got an outdoor gym as well. I try to do a cold plunge every morning for at least 3 minutes, 10 degrees centigrade or less, no more than 6. Every morning I take vitamin D3 because we don't get enough sun, and I take vitamin B complex to process my fish oils, and I've experimented with different types of supplements, and there's a few that I take on and off depending on the time of year. I try to get sunlight every single morning as well, that first 45 minutes, and yeah, I try to keep myself physically fit, and mentally I'm a huge fan of meditation. So right
what
across
type
the spectrum.
of meditation?
I just sit, and I don't know what it's called, but I basically just observe myself thinking, almost as if I'm a passenger with inside my own mind, so to speak. And so if there's a name for that, then please let me know. But that's basically what it is. I just try to detach myself from my thoughts.
Yeah, but that sounds much easier than done. Like, as also with the previous stuff you just said, like I've seen a lot of the people I've met that it can be kind of hard to maybe maintain these health routines, do meditation, all these different stuff you just mentioned. So I usually like to throw this in as well, that same question again, but which one have you maybe found that was more difficult to integrate, or you may be trying currently to integrate? Because that seems to be the hard part for many people.
Yeah, the most difficult one is maintaining the meditation, because it's very easy to say, okay, I'll do that a little bit later on when I've got a bit more time, or it doesn't matter today. However, the benefits of meditation are really only palpable when they're compounded one day after the next. So it's just it's easy to miss, hard to keep up, but with dedication and habit, it tends to stick. But if I had to pick one part of that kind of morning daily practice, it would be meditation. That's the one that I need to be more mindful of.
Yeah, ironically. But I was thinking, because I mean, your profile is a little bit out of the ordinary, I think, like as a being part of like making a unicorn company, elite athlete status, many years in the Royal Marines, right?
Yeah.
And with the block Damon, you were responsible for scaling the engineer team from 10 to 187 engineers across 14 countries, all while maintaining an exceptional 96% employee retention rate. That's not an easy task. I mean,
it's not.
What helps you doing that? Because I have met other people like similar profiles, but like it's a very hard life balance of like trying to not break it yourself, during that process, like not go mad, burnout and whatnot.
Yeah.
How do you maintain yourself?
It wasn't easy. With that said, it's not something that you can do on your own. And I think, so with the Block Demon project, it was essential that culture was built in right at the beginning. And so luckily I was there at the inception point. And so when you get things right at the beginning and you have the right team around you, actually it makes it much easier to go through that journey. And ultimately, although it sounds like that it was me that did that at the top, really it's something that can't be done unless you have the right ingredients. So the right team, the right culture, the right practices at the beginning, and then ultimately it gets to a point where it's self-healing, for want of a better way of putting it. So it sounds much more impressive than it is.
Right. Yeah, of course, everyone has an importance value of the bigger puzzle piece. But I'm just thinking, like, there must have been still a lot of responsibility into that, and maybe many hours and whatnot. And how do you then maintain, that work-life balance? Were there some key things that you kind of keep doing or remind yourself in order to?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned work-life balance. There's always a trade-off, and if people think that work-life balance can be maintained while going through that process, they are going to be seriously disappointed. The amount of trade-offs that are made mean that ultimately work prevails and life, as in family life, suffers somewhat because of the process. And it's important to be honest about that. I wrote quite a lot of things in different guises about, some of the downsides, especially with, kids and a wife. It's probably something that lends itself to someone who's single. But I don't like to do things the easy way. And yeah, on the other side, I can reflect. And if I could do the whole thing again, there would be different choices I would have made, both for my family and my own mental health as well. But we survived, so those things that don't take you down make you stronger, and I'm a better person for it.
Yeah, because I'm just curious, like, what was the biggest trade-off you might say, like, in terms of the biggest loss and potentially the biggest win? Was it worth it?
Was it worth it? I think in terms of achievement, it was worth it. However, it's impossible to recover certain elements of time, and although the family has survived the experience, I do have some regrets in terms of some of the things I missed out with Alba, my daughter, who's recently turned 11. So she was at a young age, and she learned very quickly to know that Dad wasn't gonna be there or be available or be able to attend a particular function. So when I think about those moments, that's quite sad. And so yeah, the biggest loss was affording time to my daughter and my wife as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely say that that's personally also one of my biggest fears. Like, I don't have a family or a wife and so on now. But I could definitely see that could be a potential scenario as well, And I've heard it from other guests as well, that is going to be an increasing more determined factor of their priorities. And I mean, can you, would you say like that if you look back, then you have changed this? I mean, how would you have changed it if, like, let's say we're trying to maybe talk to some of the people who are about to go into that time period like you went through with career and achievements and great accomplishment? Were there something in particular that you could have done differently? What should have been adjusted or could have been adjusted?
I would have proactively delegated more things sooner. That's the one change that I would have incorporated. Of course, it's easy in hindsight to, reflect and identify that. And when you're in the thick of it, it's very hard to let go. But what I do realize is that when I inevitably, through scale and necessity, delegated to more people, and then realized that I'd actually built a team that I could trust, things became incredibly easier. And so the one thing I would have changed is that I would have delegated more and sooner.
And even that also, again, maybe comes across, easier said than done. In order to make it more practical, maybe for people who are going to be in that same situation, what would you say looking back, were some of the signals that, yeah, that was the cue, that was the first cue, yeah, that was the second, that was the third, still persuaded myself to go the other way direction? What kind of signs would you say that you kind of, suppressed, didn't took action on, but did hear maybe?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I've learned over the many years I've been on this planet is that more often than not, there's a feeling, like a gut instinct, that if you are able to tune into that and ignore it less, that you will make better decisions. And so what I would say is, when I look back, there were key moments where something told me that the way things were working wasn't quite sustainable, or something needed to change. But I kind of just pushed those thoughts to the back of my mind because I thought that I was being a coward, or it was a challenge that I needed to rise to. And that probably speaks more about my personality than logic. And so what I would say is, you need to establish a framework early on that's identifiable and explainable. So quite often we know what to do because it's in our heads. We don't explain it because we don't necessarily need to go through that process. But in the same way that I encourage people to write things, to think clearly, what one should do there is establish very early on the framework of communication, of process, and we spoke about delegation. Quite often people use things like RACI charts: responsibility, acknowledgement, and so. And whether you prefer the RACI version or the rapid version or any other acronym that does the same thing, one should establish that early on. And then what happens there is, instead of becoming a blocker to major decisions, things can, much earlier than not, start to operate naturally with that framework, because people are then able to say, okay, I don't need Lloyd to approve this because I know from previous discussions and an agreed framework that this is the kind of thing that I can say yes or no to, and so on. So especially when you've got hierarchy in your organization, that becomes even more important. But there's no reason why you can't do that, even when the team is small. So I think not ignoring that kind of gut instinct early on, and making sure that strategically you put those frameworks in place before you need them, that's probably something that people should be mindful of as early as possible.
Yeah, and as in order to make it even more practical, do you even have some examples of like thought examples that will kind of, just to give like the audience like more concrete, like this is actually what I play. I have these thoughts that kind of works against me, pulling me in this direction, and I have these thoughts or gut feelings pulling me the other direction.
Yeah. So, and this is more a pattern than just one example, because it's
Right.
happened often.
Right.
And as I've got older, I've learned to listen to the signal earlier, the thought signal rather. So when you feel like you are the blocker for a decision, and there are potentially other people in your team that could probably do that for you, there's this tension between taking responsibility and shirking responsibility. And what one has to do is be pragmatic and think logically. And instead of going through the mental turmoil of feeling guilt for delegating, and therefore having a lens that you're shirking your responsibility, you should have that framework in place to say, very simply, am I able to delegate this task? And if so, am I confident that there's going to be a high degree of success, a high probability of success? And if the answer is yes, that is the thing to do, because now you're freed up to do other strategical or tactical things, and that could be thinking about the next 3 months, whatever, depending on whatever your role is at the time.
And could you then sense that when you actually did that, delegated, that what feedback did you get, like also from your mind and body, like, yeah, it was the right decision, okay, but I was unsure.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you say, mind and body, because you do that. There is this dual effect. So mentally, the first few times you do it, the very first time that you do it, proactively, there is a sense of, at least for me, there was a sense of guilt, because I'm so used to owning all the things and achieving this and doing that. And the first time that you do it, for me, there was a little bit of a sting, almost like I was being a bit of a coward. But after a couple of times, and then a few more, you realize actually it's the smart thing to do. And so if you can be the orchestrator of getting all these different things done indirectly, rather than you being the point person, after a few times, a few revolutions, it starts to sit in a positive sense rather than just negative. And physically, there's this sea change in available energy, and you're less likely to shirk on doing your meditation. You're in a better mental space to then go and train and then benefit from the endorphins and obviously the physical changes that happen as well. So there's this identification of, for me, first a little bit of guilt, and then realizing that actually it's the smart thing to do and being comfortable with that.
Yeah, I guess I just feel like that is a very important point that many maybe slowly get lured into, and that ends up breaking them, because it becomes a shameful thing, or like a taboo, like But again, what self-image do we have created? Like, I saw, what was it, a video recently where I was like, that's kind of interesting aspect, that women and men aspect of like what is kind of like the dualism of like what we want to kind of develop within ourselves. Like, for example, that often women get kind of shameful about trying to maybe be, like independent, leadership, standing up for themselves and stuff like that. Stuff that you could label has more masculine traits, traditionally viewed. And men are a little bit more, maybe, let's say, shameful regarding to less masculine traits, has being vulnerable, intuitive, actually sharing how they're feeling and what's going on. Oh, I don't need that because, I don't feel anything. I'm just a man. I'm a robot. I can do everything. I mean, come on. Which reminds me, like, when we talk about leadership, the old Viking word, leader, and leader, in English term, leader was actually meaning set in motion, to set in motion. And that's actually what we do, right? When we take action, and sometimes if you are intuitive, or let's say more grounding, gut feeling, that's also something that have set in motion that you actually then take action on. You got set in motion, you got moved by something, and now you move by that, and then you can move others from. So it's like a ripple effect almost.
Indeed. Yeah. So and on the leadership thing as well, I've always taken the approach of being the person that unblocks the rest of the team to do what they do best, rather than dictate. So it's almost like reversing the paradigm, where instead of me deciding that we need to do something and here's exactly how you're going to do it, it's having the trust through the right culture to be there to serve the team rather than lead the team. So when you think of it that way, it makes sense, and that ties in with what you said, your you're allowing things to be set in motion by making sure that everybody's unblocked.
And what did you notice that often was blocked, and how could you unblock it?
So the first thing, which comes through delegation, is making sure that, well, first of all, you need to make sure that you've got the right people that you can delegate to, and then immediately when you've got that, you can unblock people in various ways by delegating to them. It's important to realize that businesses are made of humans, and if you can ensure that you've got the right environment for humans to flourish, it's actually a win-win in terms of the human themselves and the business that they serve as well. And so there isn't even a trade-off. It's make sure that the members of your team can work effectively and productively, and know that if they're happy, there's much more chance of those two things happening. You then have this compounding effect, which is something I've experienced, especially at Block Demon, that there's just certain things that don't go wrong because you put these things in motion, and you have lots of these kind of recursive loops where good positive things keep happening, and even when bad situations occur, you've almost defended yourself as an organization against them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that there's a lot of observation and experience behind that. Probably. What have you observed in particular in tech that is causing distress?
So technology serves humanity in so many wonderful ways, but the people behind building those technical systems live in a world that's never the same from one day to the next. There's a new major programming language every sort of 5 to 7 years. There's something that emanates from Google or Uber or Netflix, some framework that now everybody feels that they should implement because the big guys are doing it, and quite often they're wrong. I don't want to get into political conversations about
That's all right.
Kubernetes and some other things. However, happy to do so.
Yeah.
And so what you've got is you've got humans in a system that changes much more frequently in terms of the things that you need to wrestle with mentally. And yet our brains are built to see danger in things that feel unusual or change suddenly. And so now you've got thousands of years of evolution offering a contradiction to a world that's constantly changing, and that situation of stasis is the unusual part. So things are flipped around, and I think that puts a lot of pressure on individuals to keep up with everything. People mention things like full stack developers. I think maybe for a good 5 years now, that role hasn't really existed, because when I first remember that role, you might have a LAMP developer that knew Linux and Apache and MySQL and PHP, and that was enough. Today you've got Kafka, Kubernetes, Pulumi, Terraform, TypeScript, different versions of frameworks for React, Svelte, and when we've not even talked about the back-end system yet, and various different languages: Zig, Rust, C, C++, Java, Python, and so on. And so that amount of change requires expertise to be focused in one particular niche, and then at the same time there's this expectancy on everybody to know everything within tech. And something has to give. And without the mental framework to understand that, a lot of people feel pressured to do something that's just not achievable, which is to be able to know all the things about, the internals of a database, and at the same time understand the latest and greatest developments in CSS. It's just not achievable, but the expectancy is there.
Yeah. So I was thinking, like, speaking of delegation, do you think that AI could then be like, because as you just said before, something got to give, but do you think that then AI is going to be some of the things that's going to give that back to be able to maybe keep up? Or what's your take on that?
Yeah, AI is, for me, it's controversial in the sense that,
Right.
so you've asked a question there that's multifaceted, because AI is certainly going to help. It's certainly going to help in terms of delegation, being able to give a machine a task rather than a human. However, there's a massive landscape in terms of what that could mean. So today, there's tasks that I am 100% confident in giving to AI. And there's other tasks that I would never do. And the conversations are about this massive grey area in the middle. So it's really difficult to answer the question, because there's so many heads to the problem. I think that we are in a place where AI is certainly demonstrating that it's going to have a massive impact on the world at large. But I do think that we need to have conversations about not AI per se, but break it down into its subcategories. Because if we don't do that, then we're just going to keep having these circular conversations in the different communities about whether AI is good or bad. And it's much more nuanced than that.
Right. Yeah, because connected to the previous question, like, what do you see as an overlooked area in tech when it comes to our health and well-being that's not really being addressed or actually being doing enough about?
It's a lack of understanding in terms of how difficult it is for people, within the tech landscape to keep up. And as I said before, the expectancy that they keep up with everything. It's something that's not being addressed. It's something that I certainly try to do in the roles and projects that I'm in. But as a whole, it's something that would be beneficial to people that are in these different roles within, especially within software and especially within Web3, because of the unknowns. But certainly to businesses that are employing these teams as well.
And is that maybe connected, like, with the culture you mentioned earlier? I'm curious about what specific elements were there. Like you said, like, there kind of need to be a framework from the beginning. I mean, I guess there must be if you have to eventually have 184 engineers. What and how did those elements came about, if you can recall?
Yeah. So early on, I made sure that there was a massive degree of over-communication, because psychologically, it's very hard for an individual to operate if there's a high degree of uncertainty. So instead of trying to guess whether somebody understands or has enough information, you're better off making sure that you over-communicate to the point where people may have heard the same thing, more than thrice, if not 10 times. That's a much better situation than having a team of people that have this massive degree of uncertainty because things have not been communicated enough. That alone can do so much for mental health that it's so underrated. If you do one thing if you do one thing especially in a distributed remote engineering setup, if you just over communicate and observe time zone differences, and so make that communication asynchronous, that thing alone can cure so many problems, both in terms of understanding in the business, but more importantly, the mental health of people that are part of your team. And that in itself is a framework, but it's so simple, it sounds boring. But yeah, making sure that everybody knows what they're doing and why they're doing it, both in terms of locally in their kind of sub-teams, but globally as part of the whole business strategy. If you do that, you'll have a happier team. Simple.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, because I kind of like I saw when you sent your website, codegood.co, that I think it was in the bottom. I thought like this will be a fun way to give that back to you, but in a health question, as a health-wise in your life, what is stuck, plus what did you try, plus what's the rough timeline of, do you have something right now that you currently like trying to make work, health-wise, or like you mentioned the mindfulness before, but are there other things where you can kind of see, yeah, I'm trying with this, but I'm kind of stuck, and I tried this, but yeah, like you started back then, now you're here, and because again, it makes these things more relatable to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Does it make sense? Or I can try to make an example if you want.
So, if I understand the question correctly, is it something that I've continued to struggle with, and now I'm trying something in a different way?
Yeah, exactly. In order to try to integrate it properly to suit your life.
Yeah. So, funnily enough, it's a great question. I've not really told many people this, but when I was a kid, I was kind of brought up in quite a rough neighborhood, and I was a massive fan of poetry. And so my biggest loves back when I was like 8 and 9 were like playing chess and writing poems. But because of where I was brought up, so I was brought up in a place called Moss Side in Manchester. And, back in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't a great place to be. And obviously, I was never going to tell people that I was into poetry. And throughout my life, I've written short stories. I've never published them. I've started and ended blogs. But more recently, in the past sort of year and a half, I've got back into writing and try to get comfortable with a good cadence of writing. And actually this week, one of my articles was shared on LinkedIn, and there was a bit of virility about it because even this morning, before preparing to come and speak to you, my phone just kept going off because somebody else had shared the post and somebody else had reacted to the post and whatnot. And so one thing that I've always been a fan of, but been either afraid or less confident in, is writing. And I understand how important that is. So what I'm doing differently, and during that time I've been writing a book, and every week I think it's ready, and then 6 months later I still don't think it's quite ready. So one thing that I've always felt close to and a massive fan of, but never really wanted to share, was my love for writing and sharing my thoughts. But it's something that I am kind of getting my head around now, and I'm starting to become much more confident, and I'm seeing some positive reactions. So if there's one thing that I've always had a struggle with, but understood how important it was, it's writing.
That's pretty cool. And I wanted to match that because I do understand that it might be a little bit vulnerable to then go back to something very old, because I just thought that it was kind of funny the way you wrote, like, if you want to contact me, what's stuck, plus what did you try it, and plus what's the rough timeline. You could, that's kind of an interesting question for life as well,
Yeah.
And
that question, when you frame it that way, it also tells a lot about whether somebody understands the problem in depth that they've got. Because if somebody comes to me and says, yeah, there's something wrong with the culture in the team, my timeline is 3 months, yeah, we probably need to have a different conversation. But then, if somebody says, I've been working with a company and they've said it's going to take 6 months to, fix the website, well, then we can have a better conversation, because I can tell you right now it's going to be weeks, not months. So if somebody phrases a problem and understands the timeline, that's an indication that it's somebody that actually understands the problem in some depth or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I just found it then interesting then to throw it back at you. But then as I just said, I would like to then also match that answer myself, that because it made me think, like, as a therapist, I couldn't just help to throw it back in where it came from. Because talking about writing, it's a little bit similar, but slightly different example, that I've always been very much a private person. So sometimes it has been kind of hard for other people to actually, like, takes too long time for me to slowly open up and share stuff, I don't just naturally do it, even though, well, you have a podcast. You do it now. Yes, but I never always did. It was a practice. So, and it's also like, what do you talk about, right? So one thing in a professional setting, another when you're personal. So that took a long time for me to actually slowly be better at that, come a little bit more out of my shell. And a few years back, actually I tried it for many years, on and off, to actually start writing on my biography. Because normally I thought, like, I don't know what you have thought about this, but, like, my thought was like, yeah, people will start that when they're 80 or 90. But who remembers anything? Oh, what did I think when I was 20, and what's going on? What did I do?
Yeah.
I mean, when I start to really collect everything, all the small bits and pieces, and actually really start to write stuff in my 30s, there was already there starting to be things where, like, I can't really remember that properly. Yeah. But that was really interesting, because I could see that was one of the very first thing I finally did without the inner businessman in me saying, like, oh, who's going to get the value from this? How can we make money from this? How can this be a great product? Like performance, But this, for the very first time, because for sure, when I started doing it, it was not with the intention of sharing with anybody, and surely not sell it or anything. It was just to simply start to process, well, I mean, if it's hard to share what's inside me, maybe I can do it in my own pace on writing. Start to collect pictures and whatnot. Here's another little pitch of, like, why you should start doing and creating a biography. Because I start to realize that, yeah, there's actually really great many valuable points than starting earlier than later. Because when I then started to collect links, pictures, things that has going on, through the timeline of my life so far, there were already things that were hard to find or even impossible to find, because now, guess what? They were gone. No longer able to be found. So find it now. Start to collect it. It might take some time, but you might enjoy the process as well. And it's also, speaking as a therapist as well, it was kind of self-therapeutically, because it makes suddenly you realize, and watching on your life in black and white, text and picture, and like, wow, these pages, okay, this is really what's been going on. Okay, yeah, this is it. This is my timeline. And you don't have to start. You don't have to start with, like, okay, I was born there and there. No, you don't have to. As what I did, my motivation to get started was, like, roughly the years. Sure. So actually the timeline with the years. But then I started with the year I found it most interesting, like, Yeah, that was kind of a fun year. Oh, that was a great accomplishment. Yeah, that was, wow. That was some like, great points that was really a shift going on in my life back then. Oh, yeah. And then eventually, from time to time, because you don't have to write everything in the whole day, you will eventually like get the memory of like, oh yeah, did actually happen. Oh yeah, I should write about that too. And then that get plugged in, and then slowly you start to fill out the gaps,
That's
and
a great
eventually
idea.
you actually, yeah.
Yeah, I will
So I
definitely
must
consider
say,
that.
yeah, because here's the other thing. Then I could see like future-wise, let's say that I was getting stuck in not being able to open up that fast. And if I get kids and family on one day, as a day, I don't have all the time, right? So, I mean, I was thinking, oh yeah, this could be actually a tool as well that, of course, restricted to some degree that if a lot of things happen and like, depending on what the kid's age is, but like, then read with them certain sections, and then it'll be a great conversation starter. Because then like, oh, did you really think that? Or, well, why was this happening? Why did you have to do that? And like, oh, and yeah. So you have an invitation, to actually open up certain areas that you maybe, if you don't find it easy to share yourself, well, now you have this tool to help you to, in interaction with other people and loved ones, to explore that. And even when you're not here, then it will still be there. And even then, by that time, you will probably just be able to spoon feed the AI, and then it will be able to make an AI version of you, and then now they can talk with you even when you're not here. Oh, what will Daniel say about this topic? Oh, let's say, But then you're basically creating your own little data center for your future self.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I think having those data points cohesively in one place for a future AI to make a digital self of oneself. I think, that's a super interesting idea.
And so even both the good and the bad, right? Because then I could see that slowly as I progressed. Now I already wrote over 100 pages, but there's still a lot of pictures and whatnot. But like, then eventually, like one day, then you feel like, yeah, I would like to write about this as well. But maybe that's kind of rough and hard. Like, for example, one of my piece of my history is like that I'm an orphan. The first 5 years, I was born in Romania, was an orphan in 5 different orphanages. I got moved every year somehow, and then got adopted to Denmark eventually. But like, there's a lot of stuff that I don't remember. It's kind of just suppressed, I guess. But it's still something that I feel like that if I get a future family, those will be things that I would like to be curious about. Like, what was it like to be an orphan, and like, what struggles were there, Because who knows, orphan, family-wise, family tree-wise, it's not unusual that the kids feel like, oh, I'm a little bit the odd one, or why do I struggle with this, and so on. And then like, well, your grandpa actually also had the same, but like, how would you know? So I must say, like, it has really been an eye-opener to actually start doing this earlier than later. But I just always thought, I don't know what your picture of this is, but like, it's first when you're old and, well, can't remember anything, that you start making your biography. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I've never really thought about doing a biography, and I think already you've somewhat convinced me that it's something I should potentially think about. If anything, just as a reminder for my kids and thereafter of who I am and who I was.
Especially when we're talking about the previous sharing you did with like, the trade-off was kind of the lost time with your daughter. But this is sort of like giving back that time, even when you're not here, that, well, at least she will be able to interact also in this way.
Yeah, I really like that.
And that will also have, I would like that too. But I actually tried to start this because, ironically, like, opposite to you, I don't really like writing, but I like organizing information. And that's where I could see AI was perfect, like to dictation or like as a ghostwriter. If you have to if you have to hire a ghostwriter, it can be very expensive, many thousands of dollars. But with AI, it's suddenly much more easier, and it's free and it's available, and you take it in your own pace. Again,
Yeah.
don't do it everything at once, but start somewhere, and then you will be surprised. Wow, start to build up now.
Yeah. No. So yeah, in the process of writing this book, it's something that's taken much longer than I thought it would.
Right.
But then when I look back at all the kind of edits and re-edits, it's something that organically evolves into something that's worthwhile. It's certainly not something that you can do in a week, or even with AI. I think so. To your point there about being able to do something organically and iteratively, that's certainly true. And to your point about the kind of biographical piece, I think, yeah, if it's something I want to do, I should potentially start that now, but take my time.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll just be great if that's. I really think you'll enjoy it. Again, it will be definitely having a self-therapeutically effect as well. But yeah, but thank you for sharing that memory as well.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Because again, the audience should maybe know that, or maybe don't know that we haven't met. We simply just got connected by a third party that suggested, hey, you guys should meet and have a conversation. And here we are. So yeah, I really enjoy it. Let's try to continue a little bit. How would you try to stay human with all this tech in your life?
I'm a massive fan of talking. I love to try and understand people, and that includes myself. And I think the tech should always be secondary to human connection. For me, whether it's team sports or sitting down over food and or wine, beer, whatever, juice, I think doing those very human things that we've been kind of built for, really, being able to lean on communities, whether that's just a friend or the local village or what have you. I think the names and titles of those kind of groups and communities have changed over time, but the essence remains the same. And so what I try to do is just stay connected with friends. I don't have a huge amount of friends, but the friends I do have, they're very near and dear to me. And I just try to maintain those connections. And I feel the benefits from that as well. If I've hidden myself away for a couple of days because I don't know, I've been like working on a program or doing a lot of work, I do find that the negative impacts are quite telling. And the minute I kind of re-engage with humanity, I always feel better in so many different ways. Some that you can't explain, you just feel it. So I always just try and maintain those friendships and speak with people in person as much as possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, stay human by being with other humans.
Yeah, stay human by being with humans. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. But would you say that there's probably a lot of traits, but what is one trait you will say that we have to remember in order to stay human? What will be kind of key to then try to maintain?
That's a great question. I think so. Part of the process of being with other humans, something that's really important is the art of storytelling. Because, when I've spoken to my kids, try to explain something, one thing I've noticed over time is that if that lesson comes across, or the thing you're trying to get over the line is done narratively as a story, it always hits home, or at least it has the highest probability of hitting home.
Right.
And as with kids, as with anyone you're trying to communicate an idea with, an idea to, I beg your pardon, and I think cultivating the art of telling a story is probably key, and it's probably one of the things that makes us human.
Because I just feel like that it's a valid question, like especially for the future, where we're going to maybe see humanoids or whatnot, and they're going to be so realistic that how do we even know? Like there's a Robin Williams movie that kind of explore that. The biomedical man, yeah, from the early 2000, where he basically like he acts like a robot, as he is a robot, but it's Robin Williams. And then eventually he would like to try to be human, and then like that's kind of what the story tried to explore. Like,
Right.
how far should I go? What more should I do? What does it take for me to get accepted as one of you guys? So yeah.
I mean, there is a
Yeah.
there's so many parts of philosophy we could go into there, but
Yeah.
what we're doing
That'll
there
be
is
another podcast, I guess, or another episode.
but there's an assumption there that the ultimate goal is to be human, and if you somewhat controversially were able to accept, at least for a limited period, that fundamentally consciousness is the thing that exists before everything else, one then has to ask, if there is a humanoid, should they aspire to be human? And I think this comes because all the stories that have been told through books, through film, all come from the viewpoint of a human. And so there's this assumption that, without talking about consciousness, that the ultimate goal is to be human. But what if humanity is just a bunch of ripples that are caused by these self-referential loops from the one ultimate underpinning, which is consciousness? I digress.
Yeah, it's a big one, but I feel like that kind of should be explored in another episode if we want to do that. Because I want to respect your time. We're slowly coming up an hour here. Because I still have so many questions, but again, it's just ideas. So I'm trying to think like just one question, like because I always also want to give it back to you. Like, are there anything you would like to ask or want to come across?
Not really a question, but one thing, for anything, if anything, I would like to share. A lot of people have been questioning whether they have a future within software engineering, whether it's Web 2, Web 3 and such. And there's a fear of AI. I think if we, analogous to the printing press or cars replacing horses, there's going to be a shift in terms of the actual job descriptions that are available. However, I would say to anyone that's embarking on a career with software, understanding the underlying principles is always going to be key. And when you understand networks, when you understand good architecture, when you understand how all these different pieces go together, types of databases and such, regardless of how the world evolves in terms of the use of AI within that software development lifecycle, there is going to be a role for you. Don't worry.
And what would you say, lastly, that people should, normally, like, we remember 1, 2, maximum 3 things from like a talk or whatnot, what will be a main thing you would like to remember the audience about?
Whatever you do, look after yourself. This is the reason why, when on planes, you're told to, as an adult, put on your mask first before your kids. It's because as long as you're okay, you can look after other people. So I would say, always look after yourself, and do that in 2 parts. Look after yourself mentally and physically. And as something to kind of like push people, towards doing the right thing for themselves. There's a strong correlation between strength and longevity. So as part of that process of looking after yourself, make sure you're doing some sort of strength training. The other thing I would say is read more. There's an almost infinite amount of reading material that, when consumed, will make you think in fundamentally different ways. And it just makes no sense to not lean on this massive amount of literary works to better your life, both for yourself and for your loved ones. And then the third thing I'd say is, whatever you're doing, just try and pick something in your day that is something that you enjoy, and just make it a habit. I would start there.
Nice. Do you have a book top of mind that you would like to recommend to people?
Oof, I've got so many. There's a book that I think I'm a third of the way through it now. Godel, it's called G-E-B. Godel, I think I'm pronouncing it right. Godel, Escher and Bach. And there's a musician, a mathematician, and an artist. And it talks about these self-referential loops that are part of nature. But it's a very, very deep book. I think that book I can strongly recommend, but don't expect to finish it within a couple of months. It's probably something that for the rest of your life you'll keep coming back to. I have that strong feeling that that's going to happen to me.
Cool. Well, if you will send the link, then we'll add it in the show notes.
Yeah, sure.
And maybe, I don't know, even your own book, when that comes out at some point, could be interesting.
Yeah.
Or is that publishing, or is it closed? Is it only for your?
I mean, I think I'm
your own amusement.
I'm not going to go to Wiley or O'Reilly or Penguin, because I don't really have that pedigree. So I'm going to self-publish it, and let's see if anybody buys it or likes it. But yeah, I'm very nervous about it, but yeah, looking forward to it being finished. Maybe in time for Christmas as a present to myself.
Yeah, that's a great start. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been great to have you on. Are there any other links or whatnot you'll have to you like to add? Then we can put it in the show note afterwards.
Okay.
But like, I feel like it's key also just to briefly maybe mention what you actually do and you offer to people.
Yeah. So I'm currently mostly a fractional CTO. I don't really like that title, but it's something that people understand. I'm basically a massive fan of tech, of teams, and what I do is apply years of knowledge to help projects succeed.
Yeah, I like that you wrote that I fix what's broken and ship what's stuck. Emergency software consulting.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
AI helped me with that one.
Yeah, all right. But still, it's a good one. Any last words before we end?
Yeah, whatever's going on in your life, if you've got a problem and it's weighing you down, try and seek out someone that you can speak to. It's something that I struggled with for years, and the minute I embraced letting go of shame, I did many wonderful things, and I've never looked back. So it's not about holding things in. Is not manly. It's silly. Share.
I feel like that could be like a whole episode on its own. But well, that was a great last one.
Yeah, I'll be happy to come back though and share that.
And that could be cool. I feel like there's so much more here, and I still have so many questions. But yeah, thank you for your time, LIoyd.
Oh, you're welcome, Daniel.
Yeah, hopefully making a part 2 at some point.
Okay, be glad to.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Joyful Danish. Stay human. Is it even still possible to stay human? Maybe it's not too late.